The silence in the diplomatic chamber felt heavy as Ambassador Lisa Chun walked through the massive doors of Harmony Station. Her small human delegation looked almost comical next to the towering alien representatives already seated around the circular table. The station itself was a marvel of engineering that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Spinning slowly in the void between star systems, where no single species could claim dominance, Chun had spent months preparing for this moment, studying every available piece of information about the Galactic Coalition. She knew the names of every species, their customs, their preferences, even their dietary requirements. What she had not prepared for was the sound that greeted her arrival. Laughter. The Thralax ambassador rose from his seat, his insect-like body clicking and chittering in what their translation devices rendered as amusement. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like 1,000 tiny mirrors as he gestured toward the viewing port where Earth's sole representative vessel hung in space. "Honored colleagues," the Thralax said, his voice carrying easily across the chamber, "I present to you the mighty human fleet." The clicking intensified, and several other delegates joined in what could only be described as alien chuckling. Chun maintained her composure, though she felt heat rising in her cheeks. The U's Defiance was indeed small compared to the massive warships visible through the station's transparent walls, where the Coalition vessels stretched for kilometers and bristled with weapon systems that could crack planets. The human ship looked like a metal toy floating among giants. The Vorthan military commander, a four-armed creature whose scarred hide spoke of countless battles, leaned forward in his chair. "Tell me, human," he rumbled, "how many ships does your species possess?" "Currently operational in deep space," Chun replied carefully. "We have 12 vessels capable of faster-than-light travel." The chamber erupted in what the translators struggled to render into human language. The crystalline Kuran delegate pulsed with colors that meant derision. The snake-like Nexari hissed with what might have been sympathy or contempt. Even the normally stoic Kalari observers exchanged glances that needed no translation. 12 ships," repeated the Thralax ambassador, savoring each word. "And you come here seeking membership in the Coalition. Do you understand what that means, little human?" Chin had rehearsed this moment countless times, but nothing had prepared her for the casual dismissal in the alien's tone. "We understand that the Coalition represents the greatest alliance of civilized species in the galaxy. Earth wishes to contribute to that alliance." "Contribute," mused the Vorthan commander. "Yes, let us discuss contribution. My species maintains a battle fleet of 8,000 vessels. Each one could reduce your homeworld to vapor in minutes. The Thralax swarm consists of 15,000 ships, coordinated by hive mind intelligence that makes tactical decisions faster than your primitive computers could process. What exactly does humanity offer that we cannot provide ourselves?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Chun felt the weight of not just the alien gazes, but of Earth itself. Billions of humans had watched her departure, hoping that first contact would open doors to a larger universe. Instead, she found herself defending humanity's right to exist. "Among the stars, we offer our unique perspective," she began, but the Thralax cut her off with another bout of chittering. "Perspective? We have 47 member species, each bringing millions of years of evolutionary development. The youngest Coalition member achieved faster-than-light travel when your ancestors were still discovering fire. What perspective could you possibly offer that we lack?" Chin looked around the chamber, taking in the assembled representatives. Each species was clearly ancient, their technology refined over eons of development. Their ships were works of art as much as instruments of war, sleek and powerful and obviously superior to anything humanity had yet built. But something nagged at her, a detail that seemed important though she could not quite place it. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we offer the perspective of a young species. Fresh eyes on old problems." This triggered another wave of alien amusement. The Koran's crystalline form flashed through what their translator identified as condescending humor, while the Nexari delegate actually uncoiled from their chair in what might have been surprise or mirth. "Young species," the Vorthan commander repeated. Yes, you are certainly that. But youth is not wisdom, human. Youth is inexperience. Youth is weakness. The galaxy is not a kind place to the weak. The commander speaks truth, added a new voice. The Kalari delegate had been silent until now, but their words carried weight in the chamber. We have seen species like yours before, ambitious, eager, unprepared. They burn bright and brief among the stars before reality teaches them their place. Xion felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was not going as anyone had hoped. Earth's first contact with galactic civilization was turning into a humiliation that would echo across human space for generations. What would it take, she asked quietly, for humanity to earn membership? The chamber fell silent. The aliens exchanged glances, and Chun realized they had been expecting this question. The Thralex ambassador leaned back in his chair, his compound eyes reflecting what might have been pity. Build a real fleet, he said simply. Return when you have something more substantial than children's toys. Perhaps in a few centuries, when you have learned to construct proper warships, we might reconsider. How many ships would be considered? Adequate? Chun pressed, for a minor membership? The Vorthan commander seemed to consider this seriously. 1,000 vessels minimum. Properly armed and shielded, capable of independent operation across multiple star systems. Your current technology level suggests this might take your species several hundred years to achieve. Several hundred years, Chun repeated, her voice carefully neutral. If you survive that long, added the Kalari observer, the galaxy has many predators, human. Species that view young civilizations as resources to be harvested. Your 12 ships would not delay them long. The meeting continued for another hour, but the tone had been set. Humanity was too young, too weak, too primitive to deserve serious consideration. The coalition delegates offered polite suggestions about developing their technology base, building their industrial capacity, perhaps attempting contact again when they had something meaningful to contribute. As Chun prepared to leave, the Thralex ambassador made one final comment that would haunt her journey home. Do not take offense at our caution, little human. We have seen this pattern many times before. A species reaches the stars, discovers they are not alone, and assumes they are ready to play in the greater game. Most learn humility before they learn extinction. Consider this encounter a gift of wisdom. The walk back to the Defiance felt longer than the journey to the station. Chun's aide, a young diplomat named Robert Kim, finally broke the oppressive silence. Ma'am, what do we tell Earth? Chun stared out at the massive coalition vessels surrounding them, each one a reminder of humanity's insignificance in the greater galaxy. Somewhere beyond those ships, her own species waited for news of their first diplomatic contact with alien civilization. We tell them the truth, Robert. We tell them we have work to do. The emergency klaxon woke Lieutenant Gary Walsh from a deep sleep. He rolled out of his bunk in Luna Station's communications center, his feet hitting the cold metal floor as red lights bathed the corridor in an ominous glow. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Chun's return from Harmony Station, 3 months of Earth licking its diplomatic wounds and pretending the galaxy's rejection did not sting. Walsh stumbled to his workstation, still pulling on his uniform jacket. The night shift was usually quiet, monitoring routine transmissions between Earth's scattered colonies and the occasional probe data from the outer system. But the signal that had triggered the emergency alarm was unlike anything in the database. The transmission was faint, breaking apart as it reached Luna's receivers. Walsh adjusted the filters, trying to clean up the static that threatened to drown out the signal entirely. What emerged made his blood run cold. "This is Kalari Scout Vessel Brightwind," came a voice rendered in stilted English by the translation protocols. "We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Repeat, we are under attack. 17 systems have gone dark. The coalition fleets are broken. Warn everyone who can hear this message. They hunger for all living things." The transmission dissolved into static, then silence. Walsh stared at his screens, his heart pounding. The Kalari were one of the coalition species, the ones who had dismissed humanity as too primitive for membership. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth's, their ships faster and more powerful than anything humans had built. If they were calling for help, something was very wrong in the galaxy. He reached for the emergency communication link to Earth's defense headquarters, but paused as another signal penetrated the static. This one was different, cleaner, as if transmitted by more powerful equipment. Unknown vessels detected at Grid 77 Alpha. The voice was clipped, professional, definitely human. Initiating deep scan protocols, Walsh frowned. Grid 77 Alpha was empty space, far beyond the outer planets where no human ship should be operating. He pulled up the navigation charts, cross-referencing the coordinates with known vessel positions. According to official records, no Earth ship was within 50 light-years of that location. The mystery deepened when a third transmission arrived, this one heavily encrypted with codes Walsh did not recognize. His computer struggled to decode the signal, finally producing a fragment that made even less sense than the Kaleri distress call. Production targets exceeded by 12% this cycle. Recommend accelerating timeline for Phase 3 deployment. Production targets, Phase 3 deployment. Walsh had been monitoring space communications for 8 years, and he had never heard anything like this from any official Earth operation. His confusion turned to alarm when Admiral Sandra Price burst into the communications center, still wearing her sleeping clothes but carrying herself with the urgency of someone who had been expecting this moment. "What do we have, Lieutenant?" she demanded, moving to his workstation without preamble. "Ma'am, we received a distress call from a Kaleri vessel claiming that 17 systems have been attacked by unknown hostiles. But there are other signals, coded transmissions from coordinates that should be empty space." Price studied the data displays, her expression growing more grim with each passing second. "Show me everything." Walsh compiled the transmissions into a single file, highlighting the inconsistencies that had caught his attention. The Kaleri distress call was desperate, broken, the final transmission of a dying crew. But the human signals were calm, professional, as if whatever was happening in deep space was proceeding according to plan. "Admiral," Walsh said carefully, "who do we have operating in Grid 77 Alpha?" Price was quiet for a long moment, studying the scrolling data with the expression of someone making a difficult decision. Finally, she activated her personal communication device and spoke a single word. "Activate." The communications center filled with new signals, dozens of them, all using the same encryption protocols as the mysterious transmission. Walsh watched in amazement as his screens populated with contact reports, status updates, and tactical assessments from locations throughout the solar system and beyond. "What is this?" he whispered. "Project Shadowfall," Price replied quietly. "A deep space monitoring network we established after the Coalition meeting. We needed to know what was really happening in the galaxy, beyond what the aliens were willing to tell us. The truth that emerged from the decoded transmissions was terrifying. The Kaleri distress call was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern that had been developing for months. Systems along the galaxy's outer rim were going silent. Their last transmission speaking of massive black ships that consumed everything in their path. Walsh pulled up the tactical displays, his hands shaking as he processed the information. "Admiral, according to these reports, we're looking at an invasion force unlike anything in recorded history. They're not conquering systems, they're harvesting them. Stars, planets, entire civilizations, all converted into raw materials for more ships." "The Void Syndicate," Price said grimly. "Our deep space observers have been tracking their advance for 6 weeks. They're not from this galaxy, Lieutenant. They're something else entirely, and they're heading this way." The display showed the alien advance as a spreading darkness across the galactic map. Coalition species that had existed for millions of years were being swept aside like insects. The mighty Thralek swarms that had mocked humanity's tiny fleet were scattered and fleeing. The Vorthan battle groups that could crack planets were being destroyed faster than they could retreat. "How long do we have?" Walsh asked. Price studied the tactical projections, her experienced eye calculating vectors and timelines. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach Coalition core systems within 8 months, Earth ... She paused, running the numbers. Again, Earth becomes a target in approximately 14 months. The weight of that statement settled over the communications center like a shroud. 14 months to prepare for an enemy that had already defeated civilizations millions of years more advanced than humanity. What are our orders, Admiral? Price turned away from the displays, her expression shifting from grim assessment to something harder and more determined. We prepare for war, Lieutenant. Not the kind of war the Coalition species understand with their massive fleets and ancient tactics. We prepare for the kind of war humans know how to fight. She activated the general communication system, sending a priority signal to every human facility in the solar system and beyond. All stations, this is Admiral Price. Initiate Protocol 7, I repeat. Initiate Protocol 7. We are moving to a war footing effective immediately. Walsh watched as acknowledgement signals began streaming in from locations he had never heard. Oh. Hidden facilities on distant asteroids, concealed shipyards in the outer system, manufacturing complexes built inside hollowed-out moons. The network was vast, coordinated, and clearly had been operational for years. Admiral, how long has Project Shadowfall been active? Since we first detected alien signals 15 years ago, Price replied. We hoped diplomacy would work, that we could join the galactic community peacefully. But we prepared for the possibility that the galaxy might not welcome us with open arms. The communications center continued to fill with status reports from across human space. Production facilities were shifting to wartime manufacturing. Deep space monitoring stations were repositioning for better tactical coverage. Hidden weapon platforms were coming online in previously empty regions of space, but perhaps most significantly, the report spoke of ships. Not the 12 vessels the Coalition had mocked, but thousands of them, hidden in asteroid fields and dead star systems, waiting for the moment when humanity would need to defend itself. The aliens laughed at our tiny fleet, Price said quietly, watching the tactical displays update with new contact reports. They never thought to ask what we might be hiding in the dark spaces between the stars. Walsh stared at the growing list of active human military assets, his mind struggling to process the scale of the deception. Ma'am, when the Coalition asked about our fleet strength, why didn't we tell them the truth? Price's smile was cold as the void between stars. Because, Lieutenant, the first rule of warfare is never let your enemy know what you're really capable of, and as of tonight, we're no longer sure who our enemies are. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a facility that appeared on no official charts, President Michael Torres stood before a holographic display that showed the true extent of human military capability. The underground complex stretched for kilometers. In every direction, its corridors bustling with personnel, who officially did not exist and carried out missions that were never recorded. Torres had been president for 6 years, but he had only learned about the Aerobus complex 3 days ago. When Admiral Price activated Protocol 7, the revelation had shaken him to his core, not because of the vast military infrastructure hidden throughout the solar system, but because of how long humanity had been preparing for this moment. Sir, came a voice from behind him. Colonel Ann Foster, the facility's commanding officer, approached with a datapad in her hands. Her uniform bore no insignia that would identify her as belonging to any official Earth military branch. The preliminary assessment is complete. Torres accepted the pad, scanning the numbers that represented humanity's hidden strength. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about his own species' capabilities. 12,000 operational combat vessels, he read aloud. Another 30,000 in various stages of construction. Production capacity of 800. Ships per day once all facilities are fully activated. He looked up at Foster, his expression a mixture of amazement and concern. How is this possible? Foster gestured toward the holographic display, which shifted to show a cutaway view of the solar system. What had appeared to be routine mining operations, scientific stations, and commercial facilities were revealed as components of a vast military-industrial complex. We've been preparing since first contact protocols were established, sir. Every asteroid mining operation doubles as a shipyard. Every orbital habitat serves as a command center. The lunar colonies aren't just scientific outposts, they're the largest manufacturing complexes humanity has ever built. The display zoomed in on individual installations, showing the true purpose behind seemingly innocent civilian infrastructure. What Earth's population believed to be ice mining operations in the outer system were actually automated weapon production facilities. Research stations studying Jupiter's moons were coordinating the construction of massive defensive platforms. The beauty of it, Foster continued, is that it's all perfectly legal under Earth's various treaties and agreements. We never lied about our industrial capacity, we just didn't explain what we were manufacturing. Torres studied the tactical overview, his politician's mind grappling with the implications. The coalition species, they truly have no idea what we've built out here? None whatsoever, sir. Their reconnaissance focuses on traditional military signatures. Large warships, obvious weapon platforms, centralized command structures. They're looking for the kind of fleet they would build. The display shifted again, showing comparative analyses between human and coalition military doctrine. The difference was stark and fundamental. Every coalition species builds their forces the same way, Foster explained. Massive vessels each. One, a self-contained fortress with enough firepower to devastate entire systems. It's how apex predators think, overwhelming force concentrated in a few supremely powerful platforms. But humans didn't evolve as apex predators, Torres realized. Exactly. Sir, we're pack hunters. Swarm tactics. We overwhelm through numbers, coordination, and adaptability rather than raw power. Foster manipulated the display to show tactical simulations. While they were building star destroyers, we were building something that could take them apart piece by piece. The simulations were mesmerizing to watch. Human vessels, individually much smaller than coalition ships, work together with perfect coordination. They float around larger targets like water, striking weak points and supporting each other, with a precision that seemed almost choreographed. Our ships are modular, sir. Any human vessel can link with any other to form larger constructs as needed. A squadron of our fighters can combine into a heavy cruiser. A heavy cruiser can split into dozens of independent units. The coalition has never seen anything like it because they don't think like it. Torres found himself both impressed and disturbed by the scope of the deception. Colonel, how many people know about this operation? Approximately 2 million humans are directly involved in various aspects of the program, sir. Most of them believe they're working on separate, smaller projects. Only a few hundred have the complete picture. The numbers were staggering. 2 million people keeping the greatest secret in human history, building a fleet that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen, all while maintaining the illusion that Earth was a primitive world with barely a dozen functional spacecraft. And the funding for all this? Foster's smile was slight but satisfied. That's perhaps the most elegant part of the operation, sir. We've been selling the coalition rare Earth elements, artistic artifacts, even biological samples for 15 years. They pay us in advanced materials and technology, which we immediately reverse engineer and integrate into our military production. Torres felt a moment of dark humor despite the gravity of the situation. We've been using their own resources to build weapons that could destroy them. In essence, yes, sir, though that was never the primary intention. The goal was always defensive preparation against unknown threats. The holographic display updated with new information, showing the current status of the Void Syndicate advance. The alien force had consumed 3 more systems in the past week, their massive harvester ships converting entire civilizations into raw materials for their ever-growing fleet. Speaking of unknown threats, Torres said grimly, what's our assessment of the Syndicate's capabilities? Foster pulled up tactical analyses based on coalition intelligence reports and observations from human deep space monitors. They're unlike anything we've previously encountered, sir. Their ships are massive, easily 10 times larger than the biggest coalition vessels. But more concerning is their strategy. The display showed the Syndicate's advance pattern, a methodical consumption of star systems that followed a disturbing logic. They specifically target advanced civilizations, sir. The more organized and technologically sophisticated a species is, the more attractive they become as targets. They seem to feed on complexity, converting organized matter and energy into more of themselves. Torres studied the pattern, recognizing something that sent a chill down his spine. They're not just conquering territory, they're farming civilization itself. Our xenobiologists believe the Syndicate may be a form of collective intelligence that requires certain types of organized energy to sustain itself. Traditional military resistance actually makes species more attractive to them because it demonstrates higher levels of coordination and technology. The implications were terrifying. Every coalition species was fighting the Syndicate in exactly the way that made them more desirable targets. Their massive fleets, their advanced technology, their coordinated military responses were essentially advertising their value to an enemy that consumed civilization itself. But humans might be different, Torres realized. Potentially, sir. Our distributed infrastructure, our swarm tactics, our tendency toward independent operation rather than centralized command. All of these factors might make us less attractive to the Syndicate. Foster paused, then added quietly, or they might make us more dangerous to them. The facility's communication system activated, Admiral Price's voice echoing through the complex. All senior staff to the main briefing room. We have received new intelligence from the Coalition front lines. Torres and Foster made their way through corridors lined with personnel preparing for humanity's first galactic war. The briefing room was already crowded with officers representing every branch of the hidden military structure. Admiral Price stood before a massive tactical display showing the current galactic situation. The news was not good. The Thralax home. System fell 6 hours ago, she announced without preamble. Their fleet of 15,000 vessels delayed the Syndicate advance by approximately 12 minutes. The Vorthan battle groups are in full retreat. Coalition Command estimates they have perhaps 2 months before their core systems are threatened. The room was silent as the implications sank in. The species that had mocked humanity's military capabilities were being swept aside like debris. However, Price continued, we have also received something unexpected. A communication from the Coalition High Command, specifically requesting human assistance. Torres felt a bitter satisfaction despite the dire circumstances. They want our help now. Yes, sir? They're requesting that we deploy our full military capability to assist in the defense of Coalition space. Price's expression was carefully neutral. They're offering full membership and technological exchange in return for our participation. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. The same aliens who had dismissed humanity as too primitive to deserve consideration were now begging for the help of the species they had mocked. What's our response, Admiral? Price's smile was sharp as a blade. We're going to give them exactly what they asked for, sir. They wanted to see our full military capability. She gestured toward the tactical display, which began showing the deployment patterns for humanity's hidden fleet. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate a species that learned warfare by fighting itself for 10,000 years. The Kaleri system's dying star cast long shadows across the battlefield as the Void Syndicate's harvester. Ships moved into position for what should have been routine consumption. Commander Dale Harrison floated in the command pod of his vessel, the Storm Chaser, watching the massive alien constructs through sensors that his own grandmother would have called impossible. Each Syndicate ship stretched across kilometers of space, their void-black hulls seeming to drink light itself. They moved with the patient inevitability of cosmic predators, surrounded by clouds of smaller craft that swarmed like metallic insects around dying planets. Harrison had been monitoring the Syndicate advance for months from hidden observation posts throughout the outer galaxy. He had watched 17 civilizations fall to these creatures, their desperate final transmissions painting a picture of an enemy that defied conventional understanding. Sir, came the voice of his communications officer, Lieutenant Maya Patel. Long-range sensors are detecting coalition survivors rallying around the fourth planet. Looks like a mixed fleet, maybe 300 vessels? Harrison studied the tactical display, recognizing the familiar pattern. The coalition species would mass their remaining forces around something they considered valuable, usually their homeworld or a major industrial center. They would fight with desperate courage until their organized resistance collapsed, and then the Syndicate would harvest everything. "Any response to our presence?" he asked. "Negative, sir. The coalition ships are maintaining communication silence. I don't think they've detected us yet." That was not surprising. The Storm Chaser and her sister ships had been designed specifically for stealth operations, their hulls constructed from materials that absorbed sensor sweeps rather than reflecting them. To any conventional detection system, they were simply empty space, but Harrison was not here to observe. Today, humanity was going to war. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Begin deployment pattern Omega-7." Across the Kaleri system, space began to change. What had appeared to be empty voids started, revealing hidden vessels as their stealth systems deactivated. Hundreds of ships materialized from the darkness, then thousands. Their emergence coordinated with a precision that would have impressed the coalition species if they had survived to witness it. The first wave consisted of 20,000 vessels, each one small by galactic standards but bristling with weapons adapted from a dozen different technologies. They spread out across three-dimensional space in a pattern that defied traditional military doctrine, forming not a battle line but a living cloud of metal and purpose. Lieutenant Patel monitored the Syndicate response, her voice tight with concentration. "Enemy vessels are adjusting course to intercept, sir. Looks like they're confused by our formation." Harrison nodded, expecting this reaction. Every species the Syndicate had encountered fought the same way, massing their forces for decisive engagements. They had never faced an enemy that approached warfare like a pack of predators rather than a single large threat. "Begin Phase 2, he ordered. The human fleet began to transform. Ships that had appeared to be individual vessels revealed their true nature as components of a larger whole. Modular sections detached and recombined in patterns that changed constantly, creating configurations the galaxy had never seen. Some vessels merged into long-range artillery platforms, their combined hulls supporting magnetic accelerators that could punch through any armor. Others formed defensive clusters, their overlapping shields creating mobile fortresses that could absorb incredible punishment. Still others configured themselves into high-speed interceptor squadrons, too fast and numerous for conventional targeting systems. "Sir," Patel reported, her voice carrying a note of amazement, "the coalition survivors are attempting to communicate with us. Put them through." The voice that emerged from the communication system was desperate, broken by static and fear. "Unknown. Vessels, this is what remains of the Kaleri Defense Fleet. We do not recognize your configuration or your tactics. Please identify yourselves." Harrison considered his response carefully. The coalition species had dismissed humanity as primitive, laughed at their tiny fleet, suggested they return when they had learned to build proper warships. "This is Commander Harrison of the Earth Defense Force," he replied simply. "We received your distress call." There was a long pause before the Kaleri officer responded. "Earth Defense Force? But your species was reported to possess only 12 vessels. You were misinformed." The Syndicate harvester ships had finished their approach, their massive weapons systems charging for what should have been a simple extermination. But instead of targeting the coalition survivors, they focused their attention on the human fleet that had appeared from nowhere. Harrison watched the enemy ships prepare to fire, noting their tactics with the detached interest of a professional predator. "Begin Phase 3. Target their support infrastructure." What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. Instead of engaging the Syndicate's primary weapons platforms, the human fleet ignored them completely and went straight for everything else. Fuel tenders that kept the massive ships operational found themselves swarmed by human interceptors. Communication relays that coordinated the Syndicate's movements were torn apart by precision strikes. manufacturing platforms that built new ships from harvested matter, became priority targets for concentrated artillery bombardment. The Syndicate, consciousness, ancient and patient, found itself facing something unprecedented. Every species it had encountered tried to destroy its primary weapons, its harvester ships, its obvious centers of power. The humans were systematically dismantling everything that kept those weapons functional. Enemy vessels are attempting to reposition, Patel reported. They're trying to protect their support fleet. Let them, Harrison replied. Begin Phase 4. The human fleet split into thousands of smaller formations, each one operating independently but coordinated through quantum communication networks that the Syndicate could not intercept or disrupt. They flowed around the massive enemy ships, like water striking wherever resistance was weakest, but the most disturbing aspect of the human attack was its adaptability. Every time the Syndicate modified its tactics, the human response changed to counter it. Weapons that should have been effective were neutralized before they could be deployed. Defensive measures that had protected the alien ships for eons were bypassed as if they did not exist. The humans were learning in real time, incorporating Syndicate technology into their own systems within minutes of encountering it. Ships that were damaged in the fighting would retreat briefly, then return with modifications that made them immune to whatever had harmed them. Sir, Patel's voice carried a note of excitement, we're receiving tactical data from the other battle groups. Similar engagements are occurring across 7 star systems simultaneously. Harrison allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The human fleet was not fighting a single battle, but a coordinated campaign across multiple fronts, each one designed to test different aspects of Syndicate capability and weakness. The Coalition observers, what few remained, watched in amazement, as the species they had dismissed as primitive systematically dismantled an enemy that had swept aside the galaxy's greatest military powers. Unknown Earth vessels, came the Kaleri transmission. Your tactics are unlike anything in our military database. How are you achieving such coordination across multiple battle groups? Harrison considered sharing the truth that every human ship was connected through quantum entanglement networks that allowed instantaneous communication across any distance, that their crews had trained for decades in virtual environments that simulated every possible combat scenario, that their entire military doctrine was based on the assumption that their enemies would be larger, stronger, and more advanced. Instead, he simply replied, "We adapted." The battle continued for 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Syndicate's massive ships, designed to overwhelm through brute force, found themselves unable to engage an enemy that refused to fight on their terms, their harvester. Vessels, each one capable of consuming entire worlds, were reduced to floating scrap by swarms of ships that they could barely detect. As the last Syndicate vessel fell silent, Harrison surveyed the battlefield. The human fleet had suffered losses, perhaps 300 ships destroyed or severely damaged. But they had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had stopped the Void Syndicate. Sir, Patel reported, we're receiving communications from Coalition High Command. They're requesting immediate tactical briefings on our engagement methods. Harrison smiled, remembering the dismissive words of the alien delegates at Harmony Station. They had wanted to see a proper fleet, had suggested humanity return when they learned to build real warships. Tell them we'll be happy to share our methods, he replied. But first they need to understand something important. Sir? Harrison gestured toward the viewing port, where the human fleet was already reconfiguring itself for the next phase of operations. More ships were arriving, every minute emerging from hyperspace with the steady inevitability of an approaching storm. This wasn't our full capability. This was just the advanced scout force. The implications of that statement would echo through Coalition space for years to come. If this was just the beginning of humanity's military response, what was coming next would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. In the cold void of space, the sky had indeed gone black with steel, and the galaxy was beginning to understand that the small, primitive species from the third planet had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone had imagined. The conference Chamber at Harmony Station looked exactly the same as it had 6 months earlier, but everything else had changed beyond recognition. Ambassador Lisa Chun walked through the same massive doors she had entered as a supplicant seeking acceptance, but now she moved with the quiet confidence of someone representing the galaxy's newest major power. The alien delegates who had once laughed at humanity's tiny fleet now sat in careful silence as she approached the circular table. Their body language spoke volumes about how dramatically the balance of power had shifted. The Thralax ambassador's compound eyes no longer reflected amusement but something closer to wariness. The Vorthan commander's 4 arms were held in what their cultural experts had identified as a gesture of respectful attention rather than dismissive superiority. Chun took her seat at the table, noting how the other delegates seemed to lean slightly away from her position. Through the viewing ports, the space around Harmony Station told the story of recent events better than any diplomatic briefing could. Where once coalition vessels had dominated the vista with their massive forms, now human ships moved in coordinated patterns that spoke of absolute tactical control. The ships themselves defied easy categorization. Some appeared to be traditional cruisers, their sleek hulls bristling with weapon systems that incorporated technology from a dozen different species. Others were clearly modular constructs, their basic components capable of separating and recombining for different mission profiles. All of them moved with a precision that suggested coordination beyond anything the Coalition had previously witnessed. Ambassador Chun, the Thralax delegate began, his chittering voice carefully modulated to avoid any hint of the condescension that had marked their previous encounter. On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I wish to formally express our gratitude for humanity's intervention in the Syndicate crisis. Chun nodded politely, but her expression remained neutral. The threat to galactic civilization required a response. Earth was pleased to provide assistance. The understatement was so profound that several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Assistance was perhaps not the appropriate term for a military campaign that had systematically hunted the Void Syndicate across 47 star systems, destroying their entire operational capability in less than 4 months. Your tactics were unprecedented, admitted the Calari observer, the same individual who had suggested humanity might learn humility before extinction. Our military analysts are still attempting to understand how you achieved such comprehensive victory. Chun allowed herself a slight smile. Human warfare evolved through necessity, not tradition. We learned to adapt because adaptation was survival. The Vorthan commander leaned forward, his scarred hide bearing new wounds from recent battles against enemies his species could not defeat. Your fleet capabilities far exceed what you disclosed during initial contact. How many vessels does Earth actually command? It was the same question they had asked 6 months ago when they had mocked humanity's 12 ships. The answer now carried weight that none of them had anticipated. Currently deployed in active operations, approximately 160,000 vessels, Chun replied calmly, with production facilities capable of manufacturing 800 additional units daily when operating at full capacity. The silence that followed was profound. The numbers represented a military force larger than the combined fleets of every coalition species built and deployed by a civilization they had dismissed as primitive. 160,000, repeated the Quarren delegate, their crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated shock and recalculation. And this represents your current operational capacity? Our immediate response capability, Chun corrected gently. Strategic reserves and defensive installations are classified information. The implication was clear. What the galaxy had witnessed was not the full extent of human military power, but merely what humanity was willing to reveal in the course of eliminating an external threat. The Nexari representative uncoiled from their chair in a gesture that might have been amazement or concern. How long has your species been building this fleet? 15 years, Chun answered honestly. Since we first detected alien signals and began preparing for eventual contact. 15 years, mused the Thralax ambassador. While we believed You possess 12 vessels. You are constructing a force capable of reshaping galactic politics. Chun's expression hardened slightly. While you were dismissing us as too primitive for membership, we were preparing for the possibility that the galaxy might not be as civilized as advertised. The reminder of their previous treatment stung visibly. Several delegates looked uncomfortable as they recalled their casual dismissal of humanity's diplomatic overtures. The Coalition recognizes that our initial assessment of human capabilities was incomplete, the Vorthan commander said carefully. We extend formal apologies for any offense caused by our previous statements. Apologies are appreciated but unnecessary, Chun replied. Your response was based on available information. We chose not to provide complete disclosure regarding our military capabilities. The diplomatic phrasing could not hide the reality that humanity had deliberately deceived the Coalition about their true strength. They had allowed themselves to be mocked and dismissed while building a fleet that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Perhaps we might discuss the terms of humanity's membership in the Coalition, suggested the Kaleri observer. Clearly, your species has more than demonstrated the qualifications we previously outlined. Chiang consulted a datapad, her movements deliberate and measured. Earth appreciates the Coalition's interest in membership. However, we have some concerns about the organization's current structure and decision-making processes. The statement carried undertones that made several delegates shift nervously. Humanity was not requesting membership anymore. They were evaluating whether the Coalition met their standards. What modifications would Earth propose? Asked the Thralax ambassador. Complete restructuring of military command authority, Chun began, reading from her prepared list. Integration of human tactical doctrine into all Coalition defense planning. Technology sharing agreements that provide Earth with full access to Coalition scientific databases. And restructuring of the Coalition Council to reflect current military capabilities rather than historical precedent. The demands were staggering. Humanity was essentially requesting control of Coalition military operations and equal political representation despite being a newcomer to galactic civilization. These terms are quite comprehensive, the Vorthan commander observed carefully. Recent events have demonstrated that traditional Coalition military doctrine is inadequate for emerging threats. Shun replied. The Syndicate was not the only danger in the galaxy. Our deep space monitoring networks have identified 17 other potential hostile entities beyond the galactic rim. The revelation sent a chill through the chamber. If there were other threats like the Syndicate, the Coalition's survival might depend entirely on human military protection. 17 entities? The Coran delegates' colors shifted through patterns indicating alarm. Most appear to be dormant or distant, but 3 show signs of potential expansion in this direction. Conservative estimates suggest we have perhaps 50 years before the next major threat requires attention. Shun stood, her movement causing the other delegates to focus on her with the kind of attention usually reserved for natural disasters or existential threats. The Coalition has a choice, she continued. You can adapt to new realities and accept that the galaxy has changed, or you can maintain your traditional approaches and hope that the next threat will be more manageable than the Syndicate. She gestured toward the viewing port, where human ships continued their patrol patterns with mechanical precision. Earth is prepared to take responsibility for galactic defense, but we require appropriate authority to make necessary decisions. We've learned that asking permission in crisis situations leads to delayed responses and unnecessary casualties. The implications were clear. Humanity was offering to protect the galaxy, but only if they were given the power to do so effectively. The Coalition could accept junior partnership with their former primitives, or they could face future threats without human assistance. How long do we have to consider these proposals? Asked the Thralax ambassador. Chin smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Take all the time you need. But remember that the next time something emerges from dark space to threaten civilization, you'll be calling us for help, just like you did with the Syndicate. She moved toward the chamber's exit, pausing at the threshold to deliver one final observation. 6 months ago, you told us to return when we had learned to build proper warships. We've learned quite a lot since then. The question now is whether you're prepared to learn from us. As June left the chamber, the alien delegates sat in contemplative silence. Through the viewing ports, human vessels continued their patrol patterns, their presence a constant reminder of how completely the balance of power had shifted. The small, primitive species from the third planet had indeed returned with proper warships. They had brought so many that the sky itself had gone black with steel, and the galaxy would never again make the mistake of underestimating humanity's capacity for both preparation and warfare. In the end, the coalition's vote was unanimous, not because they were convinced of humanity's wisdom or leadership, but because they finally understood a fundamental truth about the species they had once dismissed. When humans decided to build a fleet, they didn't build ships. They built the means to darken stars themselves with the weight of steel and purpose. And in a galaxy full of unknown threats, that capability had become the only thing standing between civilization and the hungry darkness beyond the rim.